Okay, let's be real for a second. When you think about celebrities meeting other celebrities, you probably imagine it's all cool handshakes, casual smiles, and hey, nice to meet you energy, right? But what if I told you that some of the biggest names in the global music industry, we're talking Grammy winners, chart-topping legends, artists with billions of streams, literally froze, stuttered, and felt their hearts racing the moment they came face to face with BTS. Yeah, you heard that right. These are people who perform in front of tens of thousands of fans every single night, people who've shared stages with the most iconic artists in history. And yet, when it came to meeting 7 guys from South Korea, they suddenly turned into nervous fans themselves. But here's the real question. Who are they? Which global superstar admitted they couldn't even form a proper sentence? Which musician said their hands were literally shaking? And which one of them had to take a deep breath just to calm down before walking into the room? You might think you know, but trust me, some of these names are going to shock you. So buckle up, because this list, it hits different. Let's get into it.
Number 5. Max, the fanboy who could barely breathe when Suga said his name. Alright, kicking off this list at number 5, we've got someone who you might not immediately expect on a list like this, but once you hear his story, you'll totally understand why he's here. We're talking about Max, born Max Schneider, an incredibly talented American singer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist who's been grinding in the music industry since he was basically a teenager. Now, Max isn't exactly a small name, okay? This dude gave us Lights Down Low, a song that went absolutely viral, racked up hundreds of millions of streams, and became one of those tracks that literally everyone had on their playlist at some point. He's worked with some serious names in the industry, he's performed on massive stages, and he's built a reputation as one of the most hardworking and genuine artists in the pop scene. But here's where the story gets really interesting, because for all his experience, for all his confidence on stage, for all the years he spent perfecting his craft and performing in front of huge crowds, nothing could have prepared him for the moment he came face to face with the members of BTS. And we're not talking about some casual backstage encounter at an awards show. No. We're talking about a full-on collaboration. We're talking about working directly with Min Youngie, also known as Suga, one of the most respected rappers, producers, and songwriters in the entire global music industry. And when that opportunity came knocking, Max literally didn't know how to act. Let's rewind a little bit to understand why this moment was so monumental for him. See, Max wasn't just some artist who got offered a random feature with a K-pop act and said, sure, why not? This man was a genuine, full-blown BTS fan long before any collaboration was ever on the table. We're talking about a guy who openly gushed about BTS in interviews, who attended their concerts, who studied their music, who learned Korean phrases just because he was so deeply inspired by their artistry. He wasn't performative about it either. This wasn't clout chasing or trend riding. Max genuinely respected what BTS had built from the ground up, and he talked about it publicly at a time when a lot of Western artists were still sleeping on K-pop or dismissing it as some niche genre that didn't belong in the mainstream conversation. He saw what millions of fans around the world already knew, that BTS was a once-in-a-generation phenomenon, and that their music transcended language, culture, and every boundary the industry tried to put up. So imagine being that person. Imagine being someone who has watched every BTS concert film, who has analyzed Suga's production style, who has studied the way Bangtan constructs their albums with thematic depth and emotional layering that most Western pop acts don't even attempt. And then one day, your phone rings and you're told that Suga wants to be on your song. Can you even imagine what that feels like? Max talked about this experience in multiple interviews, and every single time, you could see it in his eyes, that mix of disbelief, gratitude, and pure, unfiltered nervousness. He admitted openly that when the collaboration for Blueberry Eyes started coming together in 2020, he was an absolute wreck internally. Not because he doubted his own talent. Max knows he's good at what he does, but because the weight of working with someone he admired that much was almost paralyzing. He described the experience as surreal, like one of those moments where your brain can't fully process what's happening because it feels too good to be true. And here's the thing that makes this story even more compelling: the way Suga handled it. Because if you know anything about Min Youngie, you know that behind that cool, laid-back, sometimes savage exterior is one of the warmest, most thoughtful human beings in the entertainment industry. When Max and Suga finally connected, Suga was apparently incredibly chill, incredibly professional, and went out of his way to make Max feel comfortable. But did that stop Max from being nervous? Absolutely not. He said that hearing Suga's verse for the first time on Blueberry Eyes literally gave him chills. Not figurative chills, actual, physical, goosebumps, all over his body chills. He talked about how Suga's verse elevated the entire song to a level he hadn't even imagined, and how in that moment, he realized he wasn't just working with a K-pop idol, he was working with a musical genius who approached every single bar, every single word, with a level of intentionality and artistry that was almost intimidating. The track itself, Blueberry Eyes, dropped in October 2020 as part of Mac's album, Color Vision, and it was an instant hit among both Mac's fanbase and ARMY worldwide. The song charted in multiple countries, the music video racked up millions upon millions of views, and it became a perfect example of what happens when genuine mutual respect between artists translates into music. But beyond the numbers, beyond the charts, what really stood out was the story behind it. A story of a young artist who never hid his admiration, who wore his fandom on his sleeve with zero shame, and who, when the moment finally came to stand alongside his idol, had to fight through genuine, heart-pounding nervousness just to function. Max has continued to speak highly of BTS and Suga in every interview since, and he's never once tried to play it cool or act like the experience was no big deal. He owns it. He says, "Yeah, I was nervous. Yeah, I was starstruck. And I wouldn't change a single thing about it." And honestly, that level of honesty, that willingness to be vulnerable about how much another artist means to you, is exactly why Max kicks off this list at number 5. Because being nervous isn't a weakness, it's proof that you recognize greatness when you see it. And Max? He saw it crystal clear. Number 4. Becky G, the Latin queen who turned into a shy fan backstage at the AMAs. Moving on to number 4, and this one is a story that perfectly captures what happens when raw star power collides with genuine, unscripted human emotion. We're talking about none other than Becky G, Rebecca Marie Gomez, the Mexican-American singer, songwriter, rapper, and actress who has absolutely dominated the Latin pop and reggaeton scene and built herself into one of the most influential young artists of her generation. Now, if you're not fully familiar with Becky G's resume, let me paint the picture for you real quick, because understanding just how big this woman is makes her nervous encounter with BTS hit so much harder. Becky G burst onto the scene as a teenager, literally a teenager, when she started posting YouTube covers that caught the attention of major producers in the industry. By the time she was 16 years old, she had already dropped Becky from the Block, a track that sampled Jennifer Lopez's iconic Jenny from the Block, and immediately put her on the map as someone who was not playing around. Then came Shower in 2014, a bubbly, infectious pop anthem that cracked the Billboard Hot 100 and turned her into a household name in America. But Becky G wasn't content with just being a pop star. She pivoted hard into the Latin music world and absolutely exploded. Mayores with Bad Bunny in 2017 became a global smash. Sin Pijama with Naughty Natasha had the entire Spanish-speaking world on their feet, and she solidified herself as one of the queens of modern reggaeton, a genre that, at the time, was still heavily male-dominated. This is a woman with billions of streams, sold-out tours, brand deals with massive global companies, and a fanbase that spans continents. She is, by every possible measure, a star. A big one. A confident one. Someone who walks into rooms and commands attention without even trying. So when you hear that this woman, this powerhouse, this trailblazer, this artist who has looked Bad Bunny in the eye and matched his energy bar for bar, got genuinely, visibly, unmistakably nervous when she met BTS, you know that says something absolutely extraordinary about the effect Bangtan has on people. Let's set the scene, because the context here is everything. The year was 2017, and the event was the American Music Awards, one of the biggest, most prestigious music ceremonies in the United States. Now, the 2017 AMAs weren't just any AMAs. This was the night. This was the night that BTS made their American television debut performance, taking the stage to perform DNA in front of a star-studded audience that included some of the biggest names in Western music. The anticipation leading up to that performance was absolutely insane. Social media was on fire. ARMY had been campaigning for weeks, the hashtags were trending globally, and every single entertainment outlet in America was talking about these 7 guys from South Korea who were about to make history. And they did make history. When BTS hit that stage and performed DNA, jaws dropped across the entire venue. The choreography was razor-sharp, the vocals were flawless, the stage presence was electric, and in that single performance, BTS announced to America and to the world that they weren't just visiting. They were here, and they were here to stay. Now, backstage at the AMAs that night, the energy was unlike anything you'd normally feel at an award show. Every artist in the building knew they had just witnessed something historic, and everyone wanted to meet the group that had just set the internet on fire. And that's where Becky G comes into the picture. Becky G was at the AMAs that night, and when the opportunity came to meet BTS backstage, she has openly admitted that she felt a wave of nervousness wash over her that she did not expect. Think about that for a second. This is a woman who has performed at massive festivals in front of hundreds of thousands of people. A woman who has collaborated with some of the biggest names in Latin music without breaking a sweat. A woman who grew up in the entertainment industry and has been in front of cameras and crowds since she was a child. And yet, the idea of walking up to BTS and introducing herself made her feel like a fan at a meet and greet, not a fellow artist at an industry event. She talked about this in interviews afterward, and what makes her account so endearing is how honest she was about it. She didn't try to play it off or act like it was no big deal. She straight up said that BTS had an aura about them that was different from anything she'd encountered before. It wasn't just that they were famous. Plenty of people at the AMAs were famous. It was the way they carried themselves, the way they interacted with each other, the genuine warmth and humility they radiated even in the middle of what was arguably one of the most high-pressure nights of their career. Becky G noticed all of that, and it hit her in a way she wasn't prepared for. What's also fascinating about this story is the cultural dimension. Becky G, as a Latina artist, has always been vocal about the importance of representation in music. She knows what it feels like to come from a community that the mainstream industry often overlooks or underestimates. And when she saw BTS, 7 Korean artists who had broken through every barrier, every stereotype, every limitation that the Western music industry had tried to impose on non-English speaking acts, she felt a deep, personal connection to their journey. She's spoken about how seeing BTS succeed on that stage wasn't just impressive from a musical standpoint, it was meaningful from a cultural standpoint. It represented the same kind of barrier breaking that she herself had been fighting for throughout her entire career. So when she finally did meet them backstage, all of those emotions, the admiration, the respect, the cultural solidarity, the sheer awe of what she had just witnessed on stage, all of it came rushing in at once, and yeah, she got nervous. She described the members as incredibly kind, incredibly polite, and incredibly gracious, which, if you know anything about BTS, is exactly what you'd expect. They made her feel welcome, they were warm and engaging, and by all accounts, the interaction was beautiful. But that initial moment, that split second before the handshake, before the smiles, before the conversation started, Becky G has admitted that her heart was pounding. And you know what? That's what makes this story so powerful. Because Becky G isn't the type of person who gets starstruck easily. She's been around legends. She's worked with icons. But BTS hit different. They hit different because what they represent goes beyond music. It goes beyond fame. It goes beyond charts and awards and record sales. BTS represents a movement, a cultural shift, a moment in history where the world finally started to open its eyes to the idea that great art, great music and great artistry can come from anywhere. And when you're standing in front of people who embody that kind of significance, yeah, even queens get nervous. Becky G at number 4, and she wears that nervousness like a badge of honor. Number 3. Charlie Puth. The musical genius whose perfect pitch couldn't save him from Jungkook's presence. Alright, we're at number 3 now, and if you thought the stories were intense before, strap in, because this one is on a completely different level. We're talking about Charlie Puth, Charles Otto Puth Jr., a man who is, by every scientific and musical definition of the word, a genius. And I'm not throwing that word around loosely. When I say genius, I mean this man was literally born with perfect pitch, a rare neurological ability that allows him to identify and reproduce any musical note purely by ear, without any reference tone. We're talking about a gift that fewer than 1 in 10,000 people on this planet possess. Charlie Puth can hear a car horn and tell you exactly what note it is. He can listen to a song once and deconstruct every chord, every harmony, every layer of production in his head like a human audio software. He attended the Berklee College of Music, one of the most prestigious music schools in the entire world, and even there, surrounded by prodigies and virtuosos, he stood out as exceptional. This is the man who co-wrote and performed See You Again alongside Wiz Khalifa for the Furious 7 soundtrack in 2015, a song that didn't just top charts, it became one of the most viewed videos in YouTube history. A song that made the entire planet cry, a song that defined a cultural moment and cemented Charlie Puth as one of the most gifted songwriters of his generation. After that, he just kept going. One call away, We Don't Talk Anymore, with Selena Gomez, Attention, How Long, hit after hit after hit, each one showcasing his ridiculous ability to craft melodies that burrow into your brain and refuse to leave. The man doesn't just make music, he understands music on a molecular level. He sees it, he feels it, he breathes it in a way that very few humans in history ever have. So here's the question that should be running through your mind right now. What on earth could make someone like Charlie Puth, someone with that level of talent, that level of confidence in his craft, that level of musical authority, feel genuinely, undeniably nervous? The answer, as you've probably already guessed, is BTS. But more specifically, it was Jungkook. Let's go back to where this whole connection started, because the origin story is honestly one of the most organic and beautiful artist-to-artist connections in recent music history. It all began when Jungkook, BTS's golden magne, a man whose vocal range and emotional delivery have left seasoned vocal coaches speechless, posted a cover of Charlie Puth's We Don't Talk Anymore. Now, this wasn't some professionally produced studio recording. This was Jungkook just singing, with that effortless, honeyed tone that he's famous for, and it spread across the internet like wildfire. When Charlie Puth saw that cover, something shifted in him. He's talked about this moment in multiple interviews, and every time he tells the story, you can see the genuine emotion in his face. He said he was immediately struck by the purity of Jungkook's voice, the way he interpreted the song, the way he added his own emotional texture to it without overcomplicating it, the way he made a song that Charlie had written and lived with for years sound completely fresh and new. For someone with perfect pitch, someone who can detect the slightest imperfection in any vocal performance, the fact that Jungkook's cover hit him that hard tells you everything you need to know about the level of talent we're discussing. From that moment, Charlie Puth became genuinely fascinated by Jungkook and by BTS as a whole. He started paying closer attention to their music, their performances, their artistry, and the more he dug in, the more impressed he became. And then came the moment that changed everything, the 2018 MGA, the MBC plus X Genie Music Awards in South Korea, where Charlie Puth and Jungkook performed We Don't Talk Anymore, together live on stage. Now, let me paint this picture for you, because the atmosphere in that arena was absolutely electric. Imagine tens of thousands of fans, the majority of them ARMY, screaming at a decibel level that could probably be detected by seismographs, as Charlie Puth and Jungkook stood side by side and sang together for the first time. Charlie has talked about this night extensively, and what he's described is nothing short of revelatory. He admitted that walking onto that stage, knowing he was about to perform alongside Jungkook in front of ARMY, the most passionate, most dedicated, most powerful fan base in the history of modern music. He felt a nervousness that he hadn't experienced since the very earliest days of his career. This is a man who has performed at the Grammy Awards, a man who has sung in front of presidents, a man who has headlined festivals with audiences stretching as far as the eye can see. And yet, standing next to Jungkook, hearing that voice live and in person for the first time, feeling the energy of ARMY washing over him like a tidal wave, he was shook. He's been remarkably candid about this. In interviews, he's described the sensation of hearing Jungkook sing live as almost disorienting, because the voice was even better in person than it was on the cover, even better than it was on any BTS recording he'd heard. Charlie Puth, the man with perfect pitch, the man who has heard thousands upon thousands of voices in his career, said that Jungkook's live vocals were on a level that genuinely intimidated him. Not in a competitive way. Charlie isn't that kind of artist, but in the way that true greatness always intimidates. The way that standing next to someone who is operating at the absolute peak of their ability makes you acutely aware of just how extraordinary human talent can be. Fast forward to 2022, and the connection between Charlie Puth and Jungkook reached its ultimate form with the release of Left and Right. This collaboration wasn't just a song, it was the culmination of years of mutual admiration, years of organic connection, years of two artists circling each other's orbits, before finally coming together in the studio. And Charlie has been incredibly open about the fact that even during the recording process, even after having met Jungkook before, even after having performed with him on stage, he still felt nervous. Because working with Jungkook in a studio setting meant witnessing his work ethic up close, seeing how he approached every take with relentless perfectionism, watching him nail vocal runs that most singers would need dozens of attempts to land. Charlie described it as humbling. Not in a self-deprecating way, but in the truest sense of the word, being in the presence of someone whose dedication to their craft is so absolute, so unwavering, that it makes you want to be better at what you do. Left and Right went on to become a massive global hit, charting in dozens of countries, dominating streaming platforms, and giving both artists one of the biggest songs of 2022. But for Charlie Puth, the numbers were almost secondary to the experience itself. He said repeatedly that collaborating with Jungkook was one of the most meaningful creative experiences of his career, and that the nervousness he felt wasn't something he tried to suppress or hide. He leaned into it. He let it fuel him. He let the awe and the admiration and the slight tremor in his hands remind him of why he fell in love with music in the first place, because music, at its best, has the power to make even the most experienced, most talented people in the room feel like they're hearing something magical for the very first time. Charlie Puth at number 3, proof that even perfect pitch can't keep you composed when you're standing next to Jungkook. Number 2. Lizzo. The Grammy-winning queen who completely lost her cool over Jimin. We're at number 2 now, and honestly, this might be the most entertaining, the most heartwarming, and the most hilariously relatable story on this entire list. Because when we talk about world-class musicians getting nervous around BTS, nobody, and I mean nobody, wore that nervousness as loudly, as proudly, and as iconically as Lizzo. Born Melissa Vivian Jefferson, Lizzo is not just a musician. She is a force of nature. She is a cultural phenomenon. She is the living, breathing embodiment of confidence, self-love, joy, and unapologetic authenticity. This is a woman who has stood on the biggest stages in the world and commanded every single soul in the audience to feel good about themselves. This is a woman who took Truth Hurts, a song she released in 2017 that initially didn't chart, and watched it explode 2 years later in 2019, climbing all the way to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making it one of the most incredible sleeper hit stories in modern music history. This is a woman who gave us Good as Hell, an anthem so empowering that it literally became the soundtrack to people's healing journeys worldwide. This is a woman who dropped Juice, a funk-drenched, disco-flavored banger that proved she could do anything sonically. And then in 2022, she came back with About Damn Time, another number 1 hit that dominated every chart, every playlist, every TikTok trend, and every dance floor on the planet. But Lizzo's artistry goes even deeper than her pop hits, and this is something a lot of people don't realize. Lizzo is a classically trained flutist. Yes, you read that right. This woman studied classical music at the University of Houston. She plays the flute at a level that would make orchestral musicians weep, and she famously played James Madison's 200-year-old crystal flute at the Library of Congress, becoming the first person to play that historic instrument in public in over 2 centuries. She has won multiple Grammy Awards. She has sold out arenas across the globe. She has graced the covers of every major magazine, and she has built a legacy that transcends music and enters the realm of cultural revolution. Lizzo is, without exaggeration, one of the most important artists of the 21st century. And this unstoppable, larger-than-life, take no prisoners queen of confidence? She turns into an absolute puddle when it comes to BTS. Specifically, when it comes to Park Jimin. Oh yes, we're going there. Because Lizzo's love for Jimin isn't some casual, surface-level celebrity admiration. This is a deep, well-documented, extensively broadcasted obsession that she has never once tried to hide or tone down. She has called herself Jimin's biggest fan on multiple occasions on social media, in interviews, on live television, and every single time. She says it with the kind of conviction that makes you believe she genuinely means it. She has tweeted about Jimin. She has made TikToks about Jimin. She has talked about Jimin on talk shows while the hosts look at her with a mix of amusement and genuine fascination. Because watching a Grammy-winning superstar gush about another artist with the enthusiasm of a teenager at their first concert is something you don't see every day. But here's where it gets really good, the actual encounters. Because Lizzo hasn't just admired BTS from afar. She's been in the same rooms as them, at the same events, in the same spaces, and every single time, the results have been absolutely priceless. Let's talk about the award show circuit, because that's where most of these legendary interactions have taken place. Throughout 2019, 2020, and into the early 2020s, BTS and Lizzo were frequently at the same major award ceremonies, the Grammys, the AMAs, the Billboard Music Awards, and every single time. Cameras caught Lizzo having what can only be described as a full-on fangirl meltdown in the presence of Bangtan. We're not talking about subtle nervousness here. We're not talking about a slight tremor in the voice or a quiet moment of starstruck silence. No. Lizzo's nervousness was loud. It was visible. It was the kind of energy that made everyone around her start laughing because it was so genuine and so uncontrollable. She's been caught on camera clutching her chest when BTS walked by. She's been filmed doing little excited dances in her seat when BTS took the stage. She's been recorded making facial expressions that became instant memes across every social media platform because ARMY saw in Lizzo what they see in themselves, a person who is so deeply, so completely, so irrevocably affected by BTS that no amount of fame, no amount of success, no amount of personal confidence can override that feeling. And then there was the 2022 Grammy Awards, a night that produced one of the most viral BTS-related moments in award show history. Lizzo was there, BTS was there, and the universe decided to put them in close proximity. When Lizzo found herself near the members, the reaction was everything you'd expect and more. She was visibly shaking. Her eyes were wide. Her smile was so big it looked like it might actually break her face. And when she interacted with Jimin, oh my god, the internet nearly collapsed. Because here was this woman, this powerful, accomplished, Grammy-winning, chart-topping, history-making artist, looking at Jimin with the kind of starry-eyed wonder that you usually only see in fans who've waited in line for 12 hours just to catch a 3-second glimpse of their idol. She has talked about these moments afterward with zero shame and maximum enthusiasm. In one particularly memorable interview, she described the experience of being near BTS as overwhelming in the best possible way. She said that there's an energy that surrounds them, an aura, almost, that's different from any other celebrity she's ever encountered. And keep in mind, Lizzo has been around a lot of celebrities. She's friends with some of the biggest names in entertainment. She's performed with legends. She's shared stages with icons. But BTS? BTS makes her feel like she's the fan. And that's the thing that makes Lizzo's story so incredibly compelling and so deserving of the number 2 spot on this list. Because Lizzo's nervousness around BTS isn't just about being starstruck by famous people. It's about something much deeper than that. Lizzo has spoken at length about what BTS represents to her, not just as musicians, but as symbols of breaking barriers, challenging norms, and proving that authenticity and vulnerability are not weaknesses, but superpowers. She sees in BTS the same values that she herself has championed throughout her entire career: self-love, resilience, the courage to be exactly who you are in a world that constantly tries to make you someone else. And when you admire someone not just for their talent, but for their soul, the nervousness you feel around them isn't shallow, it's profound. It comes from a place of deep, genuine respect that transcends industry hierarchy and celebrity culture. What also makes Lizzo's story uniquely special is how the BTS members have responded to her admiration. They've always been gracious, warm, and genuinely appreciative of her support. Jimin, in particular, has acknowledged Lizzo's love for him with the kind of humble, sweet, slightly shy energy that makes him one of the most beloved human beings on the planet. And that mutual warmth, that reciprocal respect, is what elevates their dynamic from a simple celebrity-fan interaction to something genuinely beautiful. Lizzo doesn't just admire BTS, she connects with them on a level that goes beyond music, beyond fame, beyond the superficial layers of the entertainment industry. And the fact that she is completely, utterly, gloriously unashamed of the nervousness she feels around them, that's not a weakness. That's power. Because Lizzo has taught millions of people that it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to be excited, it's okay to let yourself feel things deeply and openly without worrying about looking cool. And nowhere is that lesson more perfectly demonstrated than in her interactions with BTS. Lizzo at number 2, because when the queen of self-love admits that someone else makes her lose her composure, you know that someone is extraordinary beyond measure. Number 1. Halsey. The superstar who cried, shook, and found a family she never expected. And here we are. Number 1. The top of the list. The story that, when you hear it in full, with all its layers, all its emotion, all its raw, unfiltered humanity, will make you understand on the deepest possible level why BTS is not just a boy band, not just a musical act, not just a cultural phenomenon, but something that fundamentally changes the people who come into contact with them. We're talking about Halsey, born Ashley Nicolette Frangipane, and if you think you already know this story, I promise you, you don't know the half of it. Let's start with who Halsey is, because the magnitude of her nervousness only truly hits when you understand the magnitude of her stardom. Halsey didn't come from privilege. She didn't come from a music industry family. She didn't have some fairy tale origin story where everything fell into place effortlessly. Halsey grew up in New Jersey in a household that struggled financially, moved around constantly, dealt with instability, and forced her to grow up faster than any kid should have to. She was biracial in a society that constantly tried to put her in a box. She dealt with mental health challenges, bipolar disorder, specifically, that she has been bravely open about throughout her career. She was, by her own admission, an outsider, a misfit, someone who never quite fit into the neat little categories that the world tried to assign her. And yet, through sheer talent, relentless determination, and an artistic vision that refused to be diluted, Halsey became one of the biggest pop stars on the planet. Her debut album, Badlands, in 2015, was a conceptual masterpiece that critics raved about and fans devoured. Closer, with the Chainsmokers, became one of the biggest songs of the 2010s, spending 12 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and racking up billions of streams. Then came Without Me in 2018, a devastatingly personal ballad that hit number 1 and proved that Halsey wasn't just a feature artist or a one-dimensional pop star. She was a songwriter of extraordinary depth and emotional intelligence. Album after album, Hopeless Fountain Kingdom, Manic, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, Halsey continued to evolve, to push boundaries, to refuse to be categorized or contained. She sold out arenas worldwide. She graced magazine covers. She won awards. She became an icon for a generation of young people who saw themselves in her vulnerability, her honesty, and her refusal to pretend to be anything other than exactly who she is. This is the woman we're talking about. A genuine, certified, undeniable superstar. And this superstar? She was absolutely, completely, hopelessly nervous when she first encountered BTS. The story of Halsey and BTS is not just a story about a collaboration. It's a story about fate, about genuine human connection, about two forces in the music industry finding each other at exactly the right time and creating something that neither could have created alone. It started before any official collaboration was even a possibility. Halsey was a BTS fan. A real one. Not a PR manufactured, label approved, strategically timed fan, a genuine, stay up late watching concert footage, learn the members' names, dive deep into the discography fan. She attended BTS's Love Yourself tour. She went to their concert, sat in the audience, and experienced firsthand what millions of ARMY already knew, that a BTS concert is not just a show. It's a spiritual experience. It's a communal event that transcends entertainment and becomes something almost sacred. And Halsey felt that. She felt it in her bones. She's talked about being in that audience and being moved to tears, not by any single song or any single moment, but by the energy. The connection between BTS and ARMY. The way 7 men on a stage could make an entire stadium feel like a family. The way the music wasn't just performed but lived, breathed, and shared with an intimacy that shouldn't be possible in a venue that large, but somehow, miraculously, was. So when the call came, when the opportunity to collaborate with BTS on Boy With Love for their Map of the Soul, Persona album presented itself, Halsey has admitted that her reaction was not the cool, collected, "Yeah, sounds great, let's do it" response that you might expect from someone at her level. Her reaction was panic. Pure, unadulterated, heart racing, palms sweating, "Oh my God, this is actually happening" panic. She has spoken about this in interview after interview, and every single time, the emotion is still palpable. She was terrified. Not of the work itself. Halsey knows she can write, she knows she can sing, she knows she can deliver. The terror came from the weight of it. The weight of being asked to contribute to the legacy of the biggest musical act in the world. The weight of knowing that whatever she created would be heard by tens of millions of people within hours of its release. The weight of wanting so desperately to do justice to a group she admired so profoundly that the thought of disappointing them, or their fans, was almost paralyzing. And then came the actual meeting. When Halsey met BTS in person for the first time in a working context, she's described the experience as one of the most overwhelming moments of her life. Not because they were intimidating, quite the opposite. She said they were the warmest, kindest, most down-to-earth people she had ever worked with. And that was what made it so overwhelming. Because here were 7 guys who had every reason in the world to be arrogant, to be distant, to be guarded, 7 guys who had achieved a level of fame that most artists can't even conceptualize, and they were genuine. They were humble. They were funny. They were curious about her. They asked about her music, her process, her inspirations. They treated her not as a feature artist hired to add a Western name to their track, but as a true collaborator, a true creative partner, a true equal. And Halsey, who had spent her entire life feeling like an outsider, who had built her career on being the girl who never quite belonged anywhere, suddenly found herself in a room where she felt like she belonged. And that made her more nervous than anything else ever had, because the stakes weren't just professional anymore, they were deeply, profoundly personal. The recording process for Boy With Love was, by Halsey's account, magical. She's talked about hearing the track come together and feeling a sense of creative fulfillment that she hadn't experienced in years. She's talked about watching the members record their parts and being blown away, not just by their talent, but by their work ethic, their attention to detail, their willingness to do take after take after take until every single syllable was perfect. And when the song was finished, when she heard the final version for the first time in its entirety, Halsey cried. She cried. Because she knew in that moment that they had created something special. And she was right. Boy With Love didn't just succeed, it exploded. The music video shattered YouTube records, accumulating over 74 million views in its first 24 hours, making it the most viewed online video premiere in history at the time. The song debuted at number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100. It charted number 1 in multiple countries simultaneously. It became the anthem of spring 2019 and one of the most iconic K-pop collaborations ever created. And Halsey was right there in the middle of it, performing Boy with Love alongside BTS at the 2019 Billboard Music Awards in a performance that was so joyful, so electric, so full of genuine chemistry that it became one of the most talked about moments of the entire ceremony. But beyond the records, beyond the charts, beyond the performances, what Halsey found in BTS was something she has described as infinitely more valuable. She found friends. Real friends. She's been on Weverse talking to ARMY. She's defended BTS publicly against critics and skeptics. She's spoken about the members with a warmth and familiarity that goes far beyond professional courtesy. She has said, in her own words, that BTS changed her, not just as an artist, but as a person. They showed her what true humility looks like at the highest level of fame. They showed her what genuine brotherhood looks like in an industry that often rewards selfishness and competition. They showed her that vulnerability isn't weakness, that kindness isn't naivety, and that the most powerful thing an artist can do is stay true to who they are, no matter how big they get. And that is why Halsey is number 1 on this list. Not just because she was nervous, though she absolutely, undeniably was, but because her nervousness wasn't just a fleeting moment of starstruck jitters. It was the beginning of a genuine transformation. It was the door to a connection that changed the trajectory of her creative life. It was proof that sometimes, the things that scare us the most are the things that end up meaning the most. Halsey didn't just meet BTS. She found a family she never knew she needed. And that's not just a celebrity story. That's a human story. And it deserves the number 1 spot more than anything else on this list. Alright, before we officially close this channel, let's do something that separates a great top list from a good one. Let's not just walk away from these 5 stories like they're random celebrity anecdotes. Let's actually break down what we just witnessed, because when you step back and look at the full picture, Max at number 5, Becky G at number 4, Charlie Puth at number 3, Lizzo at number 2, and Halsey at number 1. There's a thread running through all of them that reveals something genuinely profound about BTS, about the music industry, and honestly, about human nature itself. Think about what these 5 artists have in common. Max is a multi-instrumentalist pop artist with hundreds of millions of streams. Becky G is a Latin music queen who went toe-to-toe with Bad Bunny and came out swinging. Charlie Puth is a literal musical genius with perfect pitch who graduated from one of the most prestigious music schools on earth. Lizzo is a Grammy-winning, chart-topping, culturally iconic force of nature who plays a 200-year-old crystal flute. And Halsey is a generation-defining singer-songwriter who turned her pain into platinum records and built an empire from nothing. These are not small names. These are not emerging artists looking for a cosign. These are titans of the global music industry, people who have performed for millions, who have broken records, who have shaped the sound of modern pop music in ways that will be studied for decades. And yet, every single one of them, without exception, admitted that meeting BTS made them feel something they didn't expect. Something that caught them completely off guard. Something that, in many cases, they had never experienced before in their entire careers. Nervousness. Genuine, heart-pounding, stomach-flipping, I don't know how to act right now, nervousness. And here's the critical question that this list forces us to ask. Why? What is it about BTS, specifically, uniquely, exclusively about them, that produces this effect on people who are, by every objective measure, their equals in terms of fame and success? Is it the music? Partly yes. BTS's discography is one of the most diverse, ambitious, and emotionally sophisticated bodies of work in 21st century pop music. From the raw hip-hop energy of their early albums to the introspective depth of the Love Yourself series to the genre-bending experimentation of Map of the Soul to the joyful pop perfection of Dynamite and Butter, their catalog is a masterclass in artistic evolution. Every single artist on this list mentioned the music as a factor in their nervousness. Charlie Puth was intimidated by Jungkook's vocal ability. Max was blown away by Suga's production genius. Halsey was moved to tears by the emotional depth of their work. The music is undeniably part of the equation. But it's not the whole equation. Is it the fame? Again, partly. BTS's level of global recognition is almost incomprehensible. They've sold out stadiums on every inhabited continent. They've spoken at the United Nations multiple times. They've been received by heads of state. They've broken virtually every record that exists in the modern music industry. Their fan base, ARMY, is the largest, most organized, most passionate, and most culturally influential fandom in the history of popular music. When you're standing in front of BTS, you're standing in front of all of that. The weight of hundreds of millions of fans, billions of streams, cultural movements, historic achievements, and a legacy that is still being written in real time. That's intimidating. Of course it is. But even that doesn't fully explain why seasoned, confident, battle-tested superstars turn into nervous fans in their presence. So what is it? After analyzing all 5 stories on this list, the answer becomes clear, and it's beautifully simple. It's their humanity. Every single artist on this list, when describing their nervousness, eventually arrived at the same realization that what made BTS so overwhelming to be around wasn't their fame, wasn't their chart positions, wasn't their record-breaking statistics. It was the fact that despite all of that, they remained genuinely, authentically, unmistakably human. Max talked about Suga's warmth and professionalism. Becky G talked about their humility and graciousness backstage. Charlie Puth talked about Jungkook's relentless perfectionism paired with genuine kindness. Lizzo talked about the aura that surrounds them, an energy that's different from any other celebrity she's ever encountered. And Halsey, perhaps most powerfully of all, talked about finding a sense of belonging with them, a feeling of family, a connection that went so far beyond music and industry that it changed her as a person. That is what makes people nervous around BTS. Not intimidation in the traditional sense, not fear, not insecurity, not the anxiety of being outshined. It's the nervousness that comes from standing in front of something rare. Something you recognize instinctively as special. Something that your brain can't fully process because it defies the cynical expectations that the entertainment industry has conditioned you to have. You expect superstars to be guarded, distant, performative. You expect global icons to have walls up, to be surrounded by handlers, to interact with you through layers of PR and professionalism. But BTS? They look you in the eye. They ask about your music. They laugh with you. They make you feel like you matter. And when someone at that level of fame treats you with that level of genuine warmth, it short-circuits something in your brain. It makes you nervous because it makes you feel, and feeling, truly feeling, is something that the entertainment industry often trains out of people over time. And here's the final takeaway, the one thing I want you to carry with you after watching this entire list. In a world that constantly tells us to be cool, to be detached, to never let anyone see us sweat, these 5 incredible artists showed us that it's not just okay to be nervous in the presence of greatness. It's beautiful. It's human. It's the most honest reaction you can have when you're standing in front of people who have genuinely moved you, inspired you, and changed the way you see the world. Max didn't pretend to be casual about working with Suga. He owned his fandom proudly. Becky G didn't act like meeting BTS was just another Tuesday. She acknowledged the magnitude of the moment. Charlie Puth didn't downplay how Jungkook's talent affected him. He called it humbling and meant every word. Lizzo didn't try to play it cool when Jimin was nearby. She let the whole world see her joy. And Halsey didn't mask her panic with false confidence. She leaned into it and found a family on the other side. That is what BTS does to people. Not because they try to. Not because they cultivate an aura of intimidation. But because they are, at their core, 7 genuinely extraordinary human beings who have never lost sight of who they are, where they came from, and why they do what they do. They make music for healing. They perform with everything they have. They love their fans with a sincerity that the industry has never seen before. And when you stand in front of that kind of authenticity, when you feel it radiating off of someone in real time, nervousness isn't just understandable. It's inevitable. So the next time someone asks you why BTS is different, why they matter, why their impact goes beyond music and charts and awards, tell them this: BTS is the only group in the world that can make Grammy winners forget how to breathe, make musical geniuses feel like students again, and make the most confident people on the planet admit, with zero shame, that their hearts were racing. That's not just fame. That's not just talent. That's legacy. And legacies like that, they don't come around twice. That's an official wrap on 5 world musicians who admitted to being nervous when they first met BTS. Every point has been delivered. Every story has been told. Every lesson has been shared. This channel is now closed. Thank you for watching, and remember, it's never a weakness to be moved by greatness. It's proof that you still believe in magic.